an exploration of reality. So if
Mhm.
that helps.
Yes.
As a physician, the quote that comes past that we walk past every day at Mayo Clinic is a nation's greatest asset is the health of its people.
Mhm. I think also, well, does anybody else want to add anything before I go on? Yes, Susan. Yes, you're muted. Go ahead. You're muted. You have to unmute yourself.
While we're waiting, what's the question so I can think about it?
Oh, okay.
Good morning,
I
everyone.
I described here a little bit about how we wanted to proceed with the meeting, in the sense of understanding the cause of problems and why we're not achieving what we need to achieve. In particular, here we're talking about education, but we're also talking about education not necessarily from the goal of educating people, but also as a vehicle by which we can mobilize the masses. We can get to the masses through the education systems around the world is one way we can get to the masses and potentially engage the masses, because the traditional media and communication approaches have become so fragmented and um, polarized that they're not working, if you would, for most adults. So if we can get and mobilize young people because we know where they're at a certain amount of the day, that can be a vehicle for getting the attention of the masses, but also from a purely educational viewpoint of being able to understand why have all the efforts, when we take a look across the United States, when we take a look across Europe, the overall education situation with regards to education gap, the gap between the highest and the lowest on education has been increasing. Germany 2 years ago had the headlines in the paper during May was that every fourth German fourth grader cannot read effectively. And in the United States, last February, I think it was, they announced the results of the 2024 national exam for fourth graders, that the highest percentage of fourth graders, 10-year-olds in the United States ever could not even achieve basic reading skills. We're not talking about being at grade level or proficiency, but not even basic. Basically, they're functionally illiterate, 40%. So that means we're approaching half of all Americans, young people by age 10, not being able to read effectively. Okay, so I asked here if anybody, their thoughts were to that approach of talking first about the results of the research that we had done into the whys behind that, and then discussing the whys, because if we don't agree on the whys and then we don't
Yeah.
agree where we're trying to get to, it's very hard for us to come up with solutions to
Yeah.
get there.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
Sorry, Susan. I guess, is it Susan? I just wanted to ask while we were waiting.
Uh-huh. Okay. So I don't know, Susan, you're still muted. Okay, she might not be able to get herself unmuted at this point. You might just try writing in the chat, Susan, if you can't, if you can't, if your microphone can't get your microphone working. Okay.
So
Yep.
I can take a stab at it. I think I'm not by no means an expert. I'm more of a idealist in life. So if I were to label myself, which I don't like to do, I think we have to come up with things that are relevant, because I think a lot of young people don't see like first of all, there's something called eco anxiety. I don't know if you guys are aware of that, that it's happening all over Europe, specifically in North America, where young people are you're like, why should I bother trying? The world's going to end anyway, sort of that kind of thing. Somebody labeled it eco anxiety. I'm not sure I agree with it. I think there's a lot of gloom and doom. But what I do want to say is that we have taken the wrong approach to education in that the most curious time for someone that's young is when they're young. And we stick them in, these sort of rooms to conform to everything else. I'm not sure I have the answer, but I think that's a huge mistake because when you talk to young people, and I've done a lot of youth programs, they they have so much inside of them, and it's alternative. It's seen as alternative thinking, but it's personal thinking. And I think you talk about it all the time, that sort of having a foundational understanding of things. And I do agree with that. You have to understand the foundations of math and science and things like that. But how do we teach people, or not even teach them? I always call, instead of education, I try to call it learning, but I develop an education program because that's the world we exist in today. Um, but I think what we have to do is not try to solve the world's wicked problems in the Dare to Be Great. I think what we have to do is come up with a model that we can show that this is a way to encourage people to read, to and then because mindsets are hard to change. People, well, what about when I'm 20, I don't have a job? The obstructions are going to be so great. So just do a project that people enjoy and see the fundamental purpose of it. And
Mhm.
I think that purpose, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, Joan, if I'd like to come back to that, but I'd like to have the first part of the discussion should be what's the purpose of education
Yeah.
based on the summit that took place in 2022, the World Summit, which is one of the biggest collections, and they've been working continually since then to really say, wait a minute, is what we've been trying to accomplish with education. We have to go back a couple of hundred years or 150 years. Education, the purpose of education was to grow some workers for the aristocrats to be able to have workers and have soldiers in the
Yeah,
military. It was to get people to a state where they could follow orders
yeah,
and do things and follow orders. That was the purpose of education for many times. And I think here, Sal Khan of Khan Academy, he really describes this extremely well. He calls it the Prussian model, but that we haven't changed that.
yeah.
That the model of training everybody to be the same, to be able to do basics, is what mostly in the education systems it's all about. There's also a part that what is it, Ralph Wanneker, Swaniker of the African Leadership University. He really describes it well as the difference between just-in-time education and just-in-case education. And
Right.
we're still primarily in the just-in-case education where we try to teach you a little bit of everything. So just in case you might need that sometime later in life. And that's part of the problem of getting people to see the relevance necessarily as I'm learning stuff or I'm expected to learn stuff that I don't understand. Now, this
Mhm.
came to a head very strongly at the World Summit on Education at the UN, where they really said, "Hey, that model is no longer fit for purpose because the we everybody needs to be prepared to be a lifelong learner, a
Yeah.
successful lifelong learner. The shelf life of knowledge has gone down." And you have to be flexible to be able to learn whatever you need whenever you need to know it. So
And I agree with it, by the way. I think that's one of the mindsets we have to change is that
yeah.
education is about lifelong learning.
So we see that here as having people able and confident in their ability to learn anything at any time. This has to be the major goal of our education system in general. Now, the problem is a little bit, though, when we look and see why are we not achieving that? And I know I'm jumping ahead on this point because I want to get to that discussion on that overall purpose. But on jumping ahead, why we're not, we see here, again, looking at the US, we see that example of the Mississippi Miracle where fourth grade results have dramatically increased because they put mastery in. They put mastery. You can't go to fourth grade if you have not mastered everything through third grade. So therefore, the people taking the fourth grade test are now only people who have mastered the prerequisites. Or we look in New Jersey where they said, oh, the problem is children are not properly prepared when they get to school. So the Supreme Court in New Jersey mandated that 19 of the poorest school districts had to implement preschool, either 1 or 2 years of preschool prior to the kids getting to kindergarten. And it had the result that the children getting into kindergarten, reaching kindergarten, were almost equally prepared, at least as far as reading and numeracy goes, as kids from the better off communities. And we know that the better off communities, the highest 10% of primary schools in New Jersey, we have over 90% on average of kids achieving grade level by fourth grade. But if we look at the bottom 10% of schools in New Jersey, which include most of these Abbott, what they call Abbott preschool districts, that it's only around 10%. Actually, it's less. The average, I think, was 6% when we did the study. 6% of kids at grade level. So these kids that went through this preschool that now were almost equal going into kindergarten, we see at the fourth grade, they hit what was called the fourth grade cliff. And those kids just dropped off the cliff. And people were questioning, what happened here? And so there's been a number of studies now that show why is it that kids can be prepared for reading and prepared for numeracy, and they hit fourth grade and they were doing great in third grade. They were right up there at the top. Fourth grade comes along and they drop off the cliff. And that is, they've actually been able to study and find out exactly why. Just to give you a little preview on that, it turns out it's because K through 3, at least in the United States, the focus is on something called learning to read. And in fourth grade, it shifts to reading to learn. And if you can read, but you don't have the general knowledge and the general vocabulary, you're not going to be able to learn or read to learn because you don't understand the words you're reading. And that's the problem that you can't make up for thousands of hours of missed general exposure during those primarily first 3 years of life, but it pretty much continues on through the fifth year of life. If you don't have that basic exposure to that rich environment, it turns out that the synapses in your brain actually wither. And so these children actually have a physical disabilities when they're getting into kindergarten and going through the first years of life because they were deprived from this environment during those first couple of years. And even continuing, if you did get them all equal going into the first grade, when they're only in school about 20% of their waking hours. So when they're not in school and they're at home, those children from those upper and upper middle class families, they continue to grow even through the summer. But the children from those working and welfare class families, they do not. So they actually get, like in the summer, they have what they call the summer slide, where they actually lose a certain percentage of what they had learned in the previous school year, which all contributes to the gap continuing to grow. But then, as I say, in fourth grade, it really collapses. So that's just one example, and we can go into that in more depth. So, but before, let's go back and talk about this issue of the purpose. If our purpose, our overall purpose is to prepare all citizens, if you would, all people, to be able to be successful lifelong learners, to learn whatever they want or need to know at any point in their lives, uh, we do then, if that is the purpose, we've got to solve this problem of the physical, mental problems of both nutrition and of this environment, knowledge environment during those early childhood years. But then we also have to solve whatever other issues exist after school begins and parallel to school to make sure that everybody gets an equal shot. So the first thing is going back to this goal that the purpose of education is no longer, do you know algebra? Do you know biology? Do you know history? Do you have that capability to learn? That's number one. And once you have that capability to learn, we can say, hey, there's certain things that society expects you to understand. How does a society work? It expects you to understand certain things about how economies work, about how the world works in general, and biology works and whatever. But the first primary thing is that you are prepared to be a successful lifelong learner, which presumes that you are a successful independent learner, that you are capable of learning and that you develop that confidence in your ability to learn. So I'd like comments on that aspect, please. Yes, Sarah. Yes, Sarah.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, everybody. Happy New Year.
Yeah. Happy New Year, Sarah.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, ma. Sir, like the topic we are dealing on, sir, you all live in Western world. You live in Western world. In Nigeria, it's not like that. You understand? In Nigeria, it's not like that. The school attended was in rural area. You understand?
Mhm.
It was a great pain. And how will I put it? I fought my way through to know how to read and write by myself. You understand? Well, but the poor male children are struggling by themselves to know how to read and go to school. We have the elites, which they can pay $3 million, $4 million in school for their children. But the children in rural area has no right to this. You understand? I live in Lagos. My
Ooh, okay. We just lost Susan here. Hopefully she'll be back with us shortly. Ashok, please.
Yeah, I'll follow up. I really appreciate what she said about education is a human right, and everybody should have a right to education. Now, I think the three parts that you mentioned of self-efficacy, capacity, and epigenetics, all three of those are in a Venn diagram should be together. So what motivates people to build the capacity to learn and to apply what they learn into a relevant, meaningful context is going to take experience and practice. So I would say self-efficacy has a lot of determinants. Having a safe social emotional learning environment in a trusted and empowering and model for interaction and transcendence, as well as some sort of meme generator or co-pilot that can record the journey of the teacher, the journey of the student, and the transitions of the system. All three will be important as we go forward. And this is a great example. This eClub is a great example of collective impact by having several in members who are committed to educating each other for building our capacity and confidence that we can make a bigger difference even at the level of a UN summit.
Mhm.
Um, so how we record, archive, and transform ourselves while we're part of this e-club is also maybe an experiment in
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
But Maslow's hierarchy came to mind. We have to make sure everybody's safe. Otherwise, the consequences of adverse childhood experiences and social determinants that are not adaptive to healthy behavior are also going to get magnified. And we must put foundations of equity just right up there with right to education.
Mhm. Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. I do want to, though, focus right now on this sense of what is the purpose of the education? Is the purpose of the education that children learn subjects in general, or is the primary purpose that they learn how to learn and they are confident in their ability to learn? And it's how we get there. And Sarah, I just want to point out to the case of Nigeria, because I imagine it's very similar to the case of Pakistan, which we have had. I participate in a number of sessions there where we look at the situation. And Nigeria has the greatest number of children in the world who are not in school, but Pakistan is right behind them with the second most number, largest number of children that are not in school. And a major part that we see from reports that are coming out from UNESCO and others is even where they provide primary school in many of these areas, if the children are not given any preparation, and let's face it, they have many cases, they have no desks, they're sitting on the floor, there's no, they don't have any environment, but regardless of why, when these children feel that they're not succeeding in getting an education, or their parents say, why am I bothering, that they're not getting anything out of that, that's where the dropout rate. So we see very large dropout rates in developing countries taking place in just the first couple of years, year or two of primary school. And so this is very comparable, except you're not allowed to drop out in most development countries. School is mandatory, and so you have to attend. But as we see, we have a very high percentage of children attending school in entire communities, entire cities, where they're not getting an education. They go to school for 12 years, and they come out after 12 years and they can't read. When I was traveling, I spent 3 years traveling around the United States, speaking to teachers in various states. And I was in Pittsburgh, I think it was, when I visited I talked to the people from an adult literacy program. And I found out that almost every one of the adults that are in that literacy program to learn to read can't read, but they all had high school diplomas. So how did we get to a situation where you can get an entire group in a community have high school diplomas and can't read? We also have to keep in mind, we know that this is related to poverty. And in the United States, and especially in developing countries like Nigeria, I imagine you get into those rural communities and poverty, although it may be a different kind of poverty, but poverty is oftentimes rampant. And we look at the situation in New York, for example, 150,000 of public school children in New York City are homeless. 150,000, just that's almost 15% of the entire public school body of New York. Kids are homeless. When we take a look in 2001, We had 4 states in the United States that had more than 50% of their public school children were qualified for a free or subsidized lunch as impoverished. By 2011, that had more than quadrupled to 16, no, 17 states in 2011 had more than 50% of their public school children qualifying for your free or subsidized lunch. By 2014, it had grown to 22 states that had more than 50%. And I think here right now, nationwide, in the United States, we have more than 50% of our public school children qualifying for a free or subsidized lunch. So the poverty rate has gone up. And it's very interesting to see that the poverty rate goes up at exactly the same time as the test scores on literacy and everything go down. So, I actually, unfortunately, I don't have my chart with me here. We actually graphed it out in New Jersey, and we mapped out the test scores versus the percentage of students qualifying for a free or subsidized lunch by school, not by individual student, by school. And what
Yeah.
we found is that it is a perfect inverted correlation. Perfect. It looks like an X. That the greater the percentage of students qualifying for a free or subsidized lunch, the poorer the results in that school. And
So Bill, I sorry to interrupt. I
yeah.
was going to just add then what I heard so far is that the purpose of education is intimately related to the social determinants and the learning strategies implemented at the level of the country or the region, and that housing, hunger, and um, poverty are three major venues that educators also have to incorporate into their solution set.
Well, actually, the interesting thing is that there's a study by the Bloomberg Foundation, one of the biggest studies, looking at what goes on with early childhood preparation and the development of the brain. As I said, the brain evolves. You're not born with a fully developed brain. Your brain develops over those early years of life. And it turns out the more impulses, the more um, things that are inspiring or energizing with your brain. The more you're observing, the more you're understanding because somebody's explaining to you what's going on, the more your brain will expand, that those synapses will connect and it'll continue to grow. But if you're deprived of that, your brain actually withers. And so by the time you get to be 5 years old, there can be up to a 2 year gap in literally in mental maturity. And the thing about it is that there are studies that show that you can't recover that. That those people whose brains did not mature during that stage, your brain did finalize, but it finalized deficient of children who had that rich exposure. And you can't recover that. And that's why so many of the efforts trying to work with older children end up frustrated that it doesn't work. Not that they can't acquire a certain percentage of that back, but they can't acquire 100%. And one of the things that they say is an indicator is children whose brains did not develop that way during those first 5 years, even if they learn to read and become very accurate readers, their brains just work slower. And so they will be slower readers throughout their lives, which, because learning is cumulative and compounds, results in their not being able to learn as much over time. Anyway, but I want to keep us on this first thought here, that our primary goal is to prepare everybody to be a successful lifelong learner, to be able to learn whatever they need to know or want to know whenever they need to know it. And every single person on the planet should have that right and that capability. And we are failing them if we don't give them that equal opportunity, regardless of the cause. We're not getting into the cause of the solutions yet. We're just saying, look, our goal is to give everybody that equal opportunity, that they have that capacity and that confident in their ability to learn everything. So if we could just comment on, I'd like to get other comments on that. Yes, Sarah.
Thank you, sir. Sorry for my emotion. How can we give them this equal rights when we don't have the access or the right to do it?
No, you're into
You
you're
understand?
into solution. You're into solution. I only want the goal. I only want whether we can do it or can't do it. That's the
Yes,
second question.
yes. We can do it. We can do it. If you know, when we started talking, you were talking about the people that was giving out a solution from 2004 and be of help to other their countries. You know, we have people that can come to the meeting, that can be parts, yet they are not doing anything when they come back. The solution still remain. If I leave this table that I'm standing on, sitting on here, in the next 30 years and I refuse to remove it, it remains the same. You understand? I'm talking about my own country. If I take this pen as a statue and remain like this, in the next 30 years, if I don't change it, it remains like that. That is what we are facing in this our country. You talk about early development of a child. I never have it. So many children does not have it till today as we are talking. You know, when you bring this topic, if it flashed me back to my youth age when I was growing up. I'm so sorry.
Yes, sir. You have personally overcome tremendous challenges, and what you've personally accomplished is really great and as an inspiration. What we need to be able to find out is you managed to go and raise yourself up. How do we give every child in Nigeria that capability? That's what we've got to be looking at. And it's there's a political part because they're in talking to some countries. I've literally been told that the current landowners do not want the people living in their communities to become educated because otherwise they would refuse to do
That
the
is not
slave labor
true,
for
sir.
them,
That is not true, sir. They
right?
tell lies in the meeting. They tell lies in the UN meeting. They tell lies to people when they come here.
Yeah.
It's different
So
thing.
the
You
thing about it
understand?
is though, the thing about it is we have to though set the goal to say, okay, when we look across, there's going to be different challenges in different parts of the world. But the main thing we've got to go is say, because unfortunately we do have areas that in both developed and developing countries where we go and say, oh, you mastered algebra, you mastered history, you mastered that, you are educated now. But that person has only done what somebody told them to do every step along the way. They get out of school and they don't know how to grow themselves. They don't know how to learn themselves and they get stymied. And if we look here, there was back in the late 1960s, in Germany, there was this thing called the Baader Meinhof gang that was going and killing. They were sort of a left-wing radical group. And the interesting thing about it is when they looked into it, they found that almost all the members of this gang were the children of very wealthy and powerful people. And everybody was asking, why did those children get in that? Because those children grew up only knowing how to do what somebody told them to do, and they were not successful in life because they didn't know how to do things on their own. So they decided, let's destroy the community if that community is not going to help us be successful. And so it's not just enough that we just go and say, oh, you can read now, you can do basic education. We've got to really take a look at and do the research to find out what's going to make somebody successful. And we don't have a lot of time because within a couple of years, artificial intelligence is going to literally destroy almost all the jobs within the developed world. And when that happens, a lot of people who are saying, I only go to school and study because I want to prepare myself for a career, when all of a sudden that career option is no longer there, what's going to be their motivation? How do we get to the point but if you know how to learn whatever you need to know or want to know at any point in your life, you can cope with whatever's going to happen along the way. But if you don't, and you're only able to react to what's happening outside, and accept or live with it, you're going to be screwed. So we've got to figure out a way to move forward. The education community for at least a decade, at least 10 years. The teachers' colleges in the United States have been teaching teachers basically to stop teaching. But when you get to the schools, the practice is no, no, forget what you learned in school. You do it our way. And things stay the way they were for the last 100 years. But the question here is for us to be able to figure out, A, how do we close that preparation gap so we give kids that are growing up without that home life that's going to prepare them to be successful learners? How do we close that preparation gap? Then, when you're in school, how do we close that gap to turn you into an independent learner, and not just somebody who's following orders of the day? And all along the way, we've got these different steps. But the first thing here, and unless somebody wants to object here, I'm just going to take it as a given now that we agree that the number one goal is to turn everybody into being a successful, independent learner who's going to be able to be a successful lifelong learner. Do we agree on that goal?
Yes.
Okay, great, great. So
Yes.
we'll move on to say if we do agree to that, we've got multiple levels. We got one level that is now you've hit school, you're in school, and the goal has to be to turn you into a independent learner. But we have that problem that before you ever got to school, if your brain did not get a chance to develop because you were never exposed to knowledge and language, so that you come with those deficiencies to the school system, we can't teach. This is why so many people look at the schools that fail here in the schools. We say, okay, we have to teach you to read. We have to teach you these basics. And or they come to the conclusion is why bother? They can't learn this stuff. They must be stupid. They must not have the brains because they're not able to learn. Or the politicians come and say, well, you're not spending enough money, or your teachers are not qualified enough, right? Which we able to see in the studies we did. We found some of the worst schools pay up to 40% more per student. They spend up to 40% more per student than some of the most successful schools. So it can't be the money. We looked into the teachers and we found that there's programs out there that direct some of the best university graduates into some of these poorest school districts. But the problem is, if I have students coming in that are 2 years behind the standard, and then the state comes out and says, this is what you're supposed to teach in first grade, but they say, but wait a minute, these students don't have any of the prerequisites to be able to understand that. How do I do that? And yet we blame the teacher then and say, oh, well, they all start at age 5 or age 6. If you didn't get them to the next stage, it must be your fault as the teacher. Okay, but it's not if they didn't get the nutrition or they didn't get that early language skill. Lynn, you want to add something?
Thank you. Yes. Actually, I'd like to add a lot, but let me know when you want me to stop. It's trauma. The trauma on the planet right now is massive. And I'm here to set up multicultural body, mind, spirit, alternative healing bases open 24/7 with language apps in every community and tied to these new free school systems. And the new school systems are interfaith, hand to hand. They're already online. The AFT knows about it. I've got different groups already looking at them. Interfaith, hand to hand schools. They started out excuse me, there's a group of them in Israel that actually Baha'is, Muslims, Christians, and Jews all going, hey, it's the teachers saying, hey, we're not teaching the right stuff. Things aren't happening. This is bad, because it's war, right? And hate and war and guns. So, and even war games. And so anyway, so interfaith hand-to-hand schools are already online. They have to come into every community with these healing bases and then we have to get trade schools, massive amounts of trade schools. You teach kids how to build stuff. If that's what they like, different vocations of building. It's on stop now. Then we have turnaround art schools at Kennedy Center.
Lynn, I'm sorry if I could just interrupt you because what we're trying to do here is to stratify the discussion. So the first discussion we've been talking about here is aimed at specifically we were talking about what should be the goal. And that's where we came to the conclusion that the overall goal.
LinkedIn has, I was with before COVID, I was almost on 4,000 international businesses, heaven to earth. Okay. It's heaven to earth time. Okay. Meaning harmony everywhere. So that means the God within each person. We pledge allegiance to the flag, one nation under God. USA is supposed to take one nation under God to one world under God, the God within each person. That is their sole purpose. That's not the old programs on this planet.
Yeah.
It's always, huh?
Yeah, I know that's okay. But what I'd like to really do is when we look, the approach we're taking is we're not looking at solutions right now. We're looking right now. We're looking at the nature of the physical problems, not spiritual, but more the getting into the physical. Because if you haven't had the nutrition,
Okay, real quick. Okay, hon. Okay, I got it. Let me just get my petition. I was given an Oregon Change Agent certificate from a governor, 3-time Oregon governor, medical doctor. Okay, from my work with jobs. It's about jobs creation that are healthy and good. Okay, so I go to caring jobs, not killing jobs, caring jobs, not warring jobs. And how you do it? You go to the petition, legislation, CARES Act, pay people to care, stop the warfare systems. And in that petition, I go through, in community, if you have a lot of aggressive kids, they can do more sports, not war. I mean, it's just like, we've got to stop these warring systems, okay? And hate and gun and violence. And the answers are within. Behavioral science has total proof. Who's ever angry or upset, your answers are mine. They're in me, and they might be past lives. So that's the healing arts. These are the multicultural body, mind, spirit healing basis I've got a plethora of healing modalities that Big Pharma has pushed away since 1939. Hardcore. Light, sound, global sound healing science. Medical hypnosis.
Please. What I'd like to do is get back because where we were talking about here is if we're talking about age 6 months to 3 to 5 years, and let's say we're talking about that category because right now we know for a significant share of the student body in the United States, their lives were determined before they ever got to kindergarten. Because there are studies that show you cannot recover many of the deficiencies that are caused in those first 5 years of life. You cannot overcome them because it actually has physically impacted the shape of the brain. And so this is what we find from various studies. And then there are the studies that not only looking at it from the medical perspective, but looking at it from the cognitive educational perspective, the studies like the Providence Talks and the like there. So we want to.
Marianne Williamson has a YouTube out now too. Return to love. The planet is supposed to be shifted over to loving, caring, sharing programs for everyone, individually and collectively. And It's housing, not handcuffs.com.
Yeah.
Okay. And the drug wars over 3 different herbs.
Yeah.
Hey, they can
Lynn,
we need
if you could,
food.
contact me directly after this, because I
Yeah.
really want to cover the material
How
that
do I
we,
do? Okay, how do I do that,
uh,
Bill?
W is,
What's
I'm
your
going to put,
number?
my number. Okay. My number is, one for the US, 908
I don't know
3.
if I can call out. They might not let me. I'm a targeted individual. I've almost been killed 3 times because of my peace work with my Army captain brother. We helped start Veterans for Peace and Code Pink. I don't know. You have to
Okay.
call me or
Okay. Post your number in the chat. Post
um
your
is
number in the chat.
is
I'll
it
get in touch with you.
okay? Is it
Okay,
safe?
because I am
Okay.
interested in what you've got to say, but I think we
Okay.
have here,
Okay. Oh,
we
one
got,
other thing, real quick, Bill, because you're out of the country, is URI.org, everybody. That's it's United Religious Initiative, and they're with all kinds of natives, native organizing alliance groups, and all kinds of religions worldwide to unite them. Okay, and they're out of the country. URI.
okay,
Okay.
okay. You can
Okay.
post anything in the chat and people will be able to see that. Okay,
Okay.
thank you, thank you.
Okay.
So I wanted to just point out that whether we're looking here, Sarah, for your example there in Nigeria, I do want to bring up another example that sometimes I've mentioned. Rural India has a lot of problem. There was a documentary not too long ago. There's a woman in New York, a film in the film industry, who goes around and gives kids in developing parts of the world cameras and has them basically make their own local documentaries of what the situation is in their situations. And there was this young girl in rural India, and she was filming her life. And one of the things that she did is she showed her school. And along the way in the discussion of the school, it turns out that none of the teachers in the school that she attends could read. None of the teachers could read. And so the limitations were very great. Another example there that I'm finding is not only in India, rural India, was the example of a woman that I knew that grew up there, whose mother only made it through third grade and whose father only made it through fourth grade. But her mother insisted that her children would go to school. Her father insisted the children should not go to school because he was afraid that if the children got an education, they would leave their community and go on to another to further education elsewhere and to jobs elsewhere. And so he forbid that his wife would send the kids to school. When he was at work, she snuck the kids into school. They all got education and they all left the community, 6 brothers and sisters, and they all became very successful, but none of them remain there. And for that community, your wealth was your children. So the father felt that he lost his future when his children left. It turns out they all continued to support the family, so they actually ended up very well off, and the mother actually built a school later on. But the bottom line is that you've got parts of the world where parents don't want their kids to be educated. And I found out that there was a commissioner of education of a state, one of the states in the United States, where the commissioner of education gave a speech and said one of the biggest problems she was having was the number of parents in her state that do not want their kids to have an education. For the same reason, there's no jobs in that state that for those advanced education, and so anybody that gets an education has to leave. And the parents didn't want their children to leave. So we got various situations, and then so you got on the one hand you've got the powers, the local powers in certain areas don't want the population to get educated because they want to continue to take advantage of that population, and so if they're afraid if the population becomes educated, they're not going to obey. And then you've got the case of parents who are living in a certain style and they're afraid they're going to lose their children. And then you've got the case of the children who don't have the preparation. There's something like 7,000 languages spoken in the world. Only about 150 languages, written languages, have any volume of practitioners speaking those languages. And these the problem is if you grow up in one of those with one of those languages that is not a language used in school, and now you hit school, you're already behind the power curve before you get a chance to do anything. So this is a part of the problem, part of that general knowledge. That you have the general knowledge, and then you have the vocabulary of language that lets you express and understand the knowledge that you have. But these are expected when you hit school. It's expected that if the teacher tells you something, you understand what the teacher is saying. Because if you don't, what's the purpose? I understand this a little personally. My daughter went into fourth grade, or third or fourth grade, I don't remember which. And we sent her to this country the day before school began. She landed in the US. And she was in school and she did not speak any of the local language. She did not speak English. So that is a double whammy. Now, she was very fortunate because she could write in another language, and a teacher took the time every weekend. The teacher picked her up and took her and helped her learn English, to the point that after 3 months, when she had to change school, she joined us and had to change school. The teachers in that school never realized that she didn't speak English her whole life. Yes, Sarah.
Like everything you are saying, sir, is the truth.
I'm sorry.
Everything you
Lynn, could you
said is
mute yourself, please? You're typing. We're hearing you.
Sorry. Oops, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
everything you said is true and it makes meaning. You understand? But in our country, things are different from India, Pakistan, and the United States. Even in Ghana, most people live here to school in Ghana because of the high quality they are having over there. You understand? We have good teachers. But the truth is that when a teacher cannot get salary, it's not voluntary to work. He will take care of his family, take care of himself. Since 2016, I have been fighting to have my NGO registered. I could not. Until 2025, my NGO was registered by the grace of God. We are planning to start operation, how we can reach the children. You know, you talk about reaching 10,000 children at a time. It's going to be one step at a time. You understand?
Yeah.
Like the way we are doing it, we call it catch them young.
Yeah.
Catch them young. We never.
Sarah, just another example here, because you mentioned here about the pay. In much of rural India, teachers do not come to school 2 days a week on average because they have to work. Because there are sections, areas in India where the pay is 18 months behind, a year and a half delayed in getting paid. Okay, so yes,
Yes.
we recognize all these problems, and we got to deal with all those problems. But we got to deal with the basic problem first, general, and then we can say how do we help the other areas join in when we've got the model that will work in general. Because right now, for the most part, in developing countries, they're just copying the education system of the West. And the problem is that the people who study education in the West are saying the Western system's no good. And yet the developing countries are trying to follow that. And there was a study that was done by, what's the foundation? But the woman who did the study, and this is in developing countries around the world. She's got a lot of YouTubes out there, and she became very famous. But the thing she said is that if the developed countries continue to try to follow what the West has done, it will take 100 years to close the gap. Okay. And so the key has to be that we've got to find ways for the developing countries to leapfrog into where the West is going and not just follow what everybody else is doing. But we got to understand where that is. And I think this Ralph Swaniker here, if you haven't listened to him, he's a great speaker. And he's done a fantastic job, and they're building campuses around Africa. His goal is to educate 3 million leaders for Africa and going forward. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to not focus on the political problems, not focus on the financial problems. Those become once we know, oh, this is what it's going to take. Now we can start to work for that. So, for
Can I just say
example,
something,
yes, Joan.
Bill? Um, when I think of a title like Dare to Be Great, I don't necessarily think of education
Mhm.
because a lot of people have greatness in them
Mhm.
already.
Yeah.
So why are we
Yeah.
just talking about education? Why aren't we talking about motivation? Because you want to
Yeah.
move people who are they see the vision to
Yes.
do something, to be great.
Yeah.
And you're not having all these parameters. Like when I hear all of the problems that are exist, and I'm not naive, I know they exist, but when you're trying to then solve those problems, you forget the purpose of what you're
Yeah.
trying to achieve, which is to be great.
Yeah. Oh, I think the idea is we are seeking to be great, to be of service to our community. Okay. So we're talking here more about not so much us being great, but the service that we feel our community needs, that we're trying to provide to the community.
But what I'm
And
saying is,
Bill,
what
can
I'm
I just
hearing
interrupt?
is about the education system. And yes, it covers everything. What I'm saying is, what is the program, this campaign? Is it
Yes.
to change the education system or to bring out that greatness in people? They're two different
In
focus.
people, yes.
yes, no,
Yes,
you're
and not to interrupt, but I think one thing we can also remember about what exactly we're doing in this particular club, Joan, just to hit on what you said, our job is kind of to be great at being the influencers of the influencers. So these are extremely, you could say, motivational campaigns. I think from what I've gathered, yes, we are starting with education because we are a cause-based club and we address the things that are needed. So that's just a little bit of what
Mhm.
I gather, but it's also extremely agreeable to what you're seeing here, John.
And Jones, when we look and talk about the motivational aspect, especially for, let's say, older children, and we can take a look at Finland. Finland is they started early childhood, and by the time those kids hit first grade, which is age 7 in Finland, um, they're pretty much self-directed and self-motivated. So motivation is really a key there, and it will be a key when we're talking about the if the education system is no longer responsible for the subjects, for you learning the subjects, that becomes the responsibility of every individual. The idea is you've got to be motivated because if you're the one that's got to go out and chase and get the information or get the knowledge, then you've got to be motivated to do that. And that motivation comes from confidence in your ability to do it, as well as your recognition of the value or need to do it. But the motivation aspect is truly important. But if 40% or more of the population is deprived of the mental capability of following that motivation or being successful, then we got to do something about both. We have to do something about the motivation, and we have that project called the
But
Close the
Bill,
Education.
I'll say this. You can talk about research all you want. Not, I'm using the universal you, not you, all you want. Um, but at the end of the day, greatness is with the individual. And they just, a lot of times, they
Yes.
just want to be given an opportunity to be great, to
Mm.
show they're great. Doesn't
To be
the
great.
reading might come later, but maybe they can tell a story. Maybe they can talk to someone and say, if I identify the problem themselves, because we're going to independent lifelong learner. If I had this, I could do this.
Yeah,
They are self-motivating. They are self-helping. They are, it's personalized,
yeah,
but it gives information from the ground up. I'm
yeah,
just saying, like when I think
yeah,
of greatness, I don't necessarily think I think you have to. It's good to have education. I'm not knocking education,
yeah,
just for the record,
yeah,
because I learned something. I spend 2 hours every single day learning something.
yeah.
Okay, but
Yeah,
I'm just saying I've met so many people who are disadvantaged, and such greatness are in them.
yeah.
And we tend to just put this framework like, oh, you can't read, or you don't have a vocation, or but they are great.
Yeah,
Nobody.
no, no, you're right. But here's the problem. And if I take the extreme case of a child that from birth, other than feeding, is locked in a closet, and all they know how to do is grunt when they get to school, and they don't know any language, they can't speak, they can't understand anything anybody is saying.
Yeah,
That's the
but Bill,
extreme.
I'm not talking about that. I think what I'm saying is all of those things exist, and yes, we have to come up with solutions for that. But is this campaign to go in every closet and take that child out? No, the campaign is to show a way to develop greatness. It's not about
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes.
I just think that we're getting bogged down in what I see a lot of committees get bogged down is that they take on all of the world problem to solve and then nothing gets solved.
Yeah, okay.
Right,
Here's
I have to go back
where,
to the personal level.
yeah,
Can I just say something? Because there's
sure,
one
Jay.
line. I just like to throw one line in there just to
Yeah,
think about. And it's kind of the essence of my 45-year research um and the goal of our game, the platform is the goal of the game is to actualize your highest potential and then help the other players to realize their highest. We
mhm,
have to reframe the whole framework that has been created in our systems of our capitalistic, monopolistic systems that are designed to be reverse paradigm of reality. So we need to, I think there's a major switch that has to happen. And, so getting back, so I totally
yeah,
agree, that really has to get back to that core of why we're learning and but again, the system is against it. So we have to kind of go around the system and get back to the individual and get back to the kids and get them inspired to
yeah, yeah.
play at another level.
Right. And right now, part of the reason why I'm mentioning this is because we see in those school districts that I was talking about that are having these very, very poor results year after year after year. The mental illness problems that start happening around grade 4 and 5 is huge. Why? Because these kids have been just told year after year after year, you're wrong, you're stupid, you can't do anything. That's what we do with kids. We go here, and this is why the district attorney in Southern California, who did a study on this, found that in we have many primary schools, elementary schools where 1 out of 3 boys entering first grade, entering first grade, is damned to spend a year in prison before they're 30 years old. Okay? Why? Why is that? It's because these kids are put into a system that they were not prepared to succeed in, and therefore they fail. And then we tell them they fail and we tell them they're no good. And so they grow up believing the only thing they can do is no good things because we've taught them that that's all they're capable of doing. So the key here is the key to making people confident, self independent learners, confident independent learners is you have to help them be successful. They have to be successful. So the problem is going to be here. We're not the church. We're not the religious community. So we are not out there trying to go and save people's souls. That's not the basic of the society here is to prepare somebody to be able to be a successful member of that society, a successful contributing member to that society. And the to that end, we also have to watch out because there's another aspect here. It's the individual versus society. And we have to watch out because sometimes we can go, I have the feeling I could go into any school. I don't care how bad that school is. I believe I could go into that school and I could turn around and make most of those kids be successful as they could be at that age. I also believe we see solutions that are going to let us close that preparation gap. Somebody has got to echo feedback. Sarah, I think that's you. If you could turn off your microphone, please, while you're listening. I'll just mute you. Okay. So the key thing is that it's very easy to figure out what we can do about individuals. It's very easy to think how you could be a principal of a school and make that school better for every child that's going there. Our problem is we have to think like a minister of education, and we have to think here, well, wait a minute, wait, I don't have direct hands-on those kids. I've got to deal at a distance through a system and a mechanism, and we've got to figure out here what we can do because and maybe it's my military background, but the thing about it is we realize that sometimes you've got to send an individual to their death to because of the overall situation for the mass of the body. So you sacrifice certain units, you sacrifice individuals.
So
We
Bill,
we
let me please say something. Like I want to ask you directly. Are we trying to change the education system, or are we trying to motivate people to be great?
No, there's two different things. One is our
I'm
club's
asking what we're
philosophy.
trying, but I'm saying
What
if
we're
the
trying to do
campaign,
here,
if
what we're trying
it,
to do here in this particular case with the education is improve the education system.
okay, so that's a very long term.
Doesn't have to be.
And I'm good for that. I'm good for
Yep.
that because I think decisions should be made long term.
Yep.
But what about the people who are now needing, can we not do something, go into the schools and have, say, do a campaign, a very packaged campaign, small, give it to all the teachers and they work together and, maybe identify a couple of children that are having issues or are smart, both, and try to get some our own um, our own statistics if because that's how the Western world, oh, everybody's doing it, and so the individual gets left alone.
Yep.
Um,
So
I,
that's something we have. We when we
I'm just
talk,
saying that to just do something, say for 3 months
yeah.
and see what the response is, rather because you can't make change if you don't have a track record.
Okay, Joan, here's the thing that I was trying to keep from. So we sort of go step by step and look at the different ages. But if I take a look at that K through 4, that fourth grade cliff that we were talking about, and saying, what do I do about those kids that are there now? Okay, that many of them missed a lot of when they were in first grade, second grade, third grade, or kindergarten. They missed a lot of that, and they come out. We have an example of a sixth grade teacher, for example, in California, who he was a sixth grade math teacher. Because of he was in one of the worst school districts in California, and as a result, almost every single one of the students in his class had failed fifth grade math. But they got promoted because you got to fail multiple subjects to be held back. So social promotion, whatever you want to call it. The students that he had in his sixth grade math were at a second grade level, third grade level, or worse. And yet, 1 year later, His class was one of the best in California. Okay. So we see how you can actually take it. And what happened is these kids, when they become successful, it generates pride. It says, look at me. I'm not stupid. I'm smart. I'm now one of the best kids here. Carol Dweck from Stanford University has done numbers of studies on doing that and demonstrating we can take situations and turn those situations around and get kids to be successful, and it makes them proud. And when you make them proud in any subject, especially math, which people think is one of the hardest subjects, it boils over into all the subjects as they gain the confidence in their ability to learn. So we see those, and we've actually got a written plan of how we could implement that in pilot projects in various parts of the world. And Jerica is looking at what we can do along those lines in northwestern Ohio and southeastern Michigan and southwestern Ontario. And we are looking to see, can we kick off a similar project in New Jersey and a similar project in Mississippi. So as pilots, to demonstrate that in 1 year, you can not only close the education gap, because the average achievement in New Jersey of schools, all the schools, is less than 50%. So if we can turn around, and our goal is to be able to take 10 of the worst schools and show we can raise them to an average of 70% in 1 year. Okay. So, and then because if we can show that these worst schools can do that, we remove any excuse that any other school can say, well, it's an unfixable problem. We can't do anything about this problem. So that's the sort of the approach that we look to do that. And we want to kick that and get that off the ground. We had COVID, and then the other problem is when you get into the elections, because we just had an election this year in New Jersey, it's very hard to do anything and get the support when you're in the middle of an election cycle until those people actually get into the chair, which is a new governor taking over here shortly, or like we have a new mayor in New York City who has said he wants to bring a preschool down to age 2. Finland was successful bringing it down to age 6 months to 9 months. And that resulted in Finland jumping from being a middle level education system to being the #1 education system in the Western world for decades. So yes, that's sort of the approach that we want to take, and I want to get into describing those. But the start off is to, as I said, to recognize what's it going to take, and going in and tutoring and helping. We see Rotary's been doing that for decades, and going into individual schools, taking individual students and let's tutor them, and yet we see no improvement. We see the overall results for the country get worse and worse and worse. So that's not a very good strategic solution. It's great for the people that got helped, but it doesn't solve the problems. And we are focused here to be great. We're focused on trying to solve the problems, not fix the symptoms for some individuals. I hope that makes sense, or if anybody wants to comment on that. Yes, Susan.
Hello. If we are to solve the problem, is it with the government? Is it with is it with our finance, our timing? How do we solve the problem where we don't have the means and the resources?
Yeah. So then we gotta figure out.
Is it by just speaking?
No, Jerica mentioned. Jerica mentioned we have to figure out how. Yeah, Jerica mentioned we have to figure out how do we influence the people of influence. So, for example, if I take Nigeria as a particular example, we have several influential people in Nigeria that want to participate in making a difference in this direction. This includes your former Minister of Education. You had the
How do we meet them? Because you cannot reach them. They can say they can do something. They don't do it. How do
No.
we reach them?
There's a lot of governments that have promised to do things, whether it's for climate change or what, and they've not done it.
They're not doing anything. If they say that in the meeting and come home and do nothing.
You know, the thing about it is we have part of our plan looking at a country like Nigeria. The only thing we want from them is that they say, okay, we don't need them to actually do something. We need them to go and say, okay. And the reason I'll give you, we tried a pilot. It included Uganda and a number of European countries. And when they went out and tried to do it through social media, and the schools all said, this is really great. Oh, we love doing this. And then when the day came, nobody did anything. And when they went to find out why, they found out that the schools may want to do it, but they're not allowed to do it without the permission of the Ministry
You're
of
not
Education.
allowed to do. You don't have anybody to cry to. You don't have anybody that. How can we do something on our own?
Yeah.
Sir, I'm in this meeting now. I'm in a part of this group now.
Yeah.
I'm on my own.
Yeah.
I'm on my own. Not even the next door neighbor, the government of Nigeria, the senator, the teacher that comes to UN meeting, they come to say something and take the money. If they give them money, they eat it. They don't care about anything. You understand? Me and my husband, we have been reaching people with the little we have for years.
Yeah.
With the little we have since since I was born. Since I was born, I've not gotten a pain from my government.
I think Bill too, and Sarah, I think to give a little light and clarity, you know, the reason why we simply need to be influential enough for these particular power heads to say yes, it's so that we can actually go in ourselves. And Bill, if you could just touch on maybe even, you know, after we have the yes, you know, the deployment of different clubs around the world and what they're exactly equipped with absolutely will be different due to the variations of circumstances.
Yeah.
But ultimately, once we get that yes, we can then deploy and enact those kind of mass movements that we need to make a pivot, because if we're still handling things in small clusters, it really doesn't move at the pace that we need.
Right.
We need a universal mass movement to happen for things to make a pivot. This is the first thing that we are focused on, but you know, there are many more down the line. But if we can cause these mass movements to happen, that sort of supply and demand, we now have a global demand for it, and it opens a lot of the doors as far as who we influence, how fast we can get things to happen.
Right. And also we have tens of thousands of Rotarians in Nigeria. And these are people that typically have a degree of influence. Plus, Jerica, if you recall, we met, I think it was the daughter of, what's the cement family in Nigeria? Billionaires at that event in New York. And so there are people there that they're not going to do it only because of the goodness of their heart. But, you know, we went out here. Imagine that you would go out and say, you know what? I want to have a contest here, and we want to give every single graduate of the school that shows the most improvement, we're going to give them a brand new sports car.